All right, so welcome. If you guys are new to 11:12, you're in for a series that is going to be unlike any series that we do, which is that we are a Bible-believing people, that we will spend the majority of any given week inside of Scripture. There's one series throughout the year that we actually make almost the opposite commitment, which is to say there's a lot of people around us who their hang up on following Jesus. Scripture makes it very clear that we want to be all things to all people, that through the Holy Spirit we might win some. It says that we ought to give a reasonable defense for why we believe what we believe, 1 Peter tells us. And through all that, we believe it is our duty as Christians to do twofold. One, to evangelize to those whose reason for not following Jesus is an intellectual one or an intellectual endeavor, and also to equip people who do follow Jesus to have a reason for why you do. I firmly believe that as a Christian or as a non-Christian, you should really have an answer to the Jesus problem of our world. The Jesus problem of our world is that 2,000 years ago, a series of events took place that changed our calendar system. It changed the way we see everything. It changed our whole Judeo-Christian ethics system that where everything is built on. That there's this movement that's following Jesus to that day, that we're holding the same texts that were texts back then. And there's this movement that continues to progress through every culture, through every society, through the Dark Ages, through the Renaissance, through the Reformation. All these things continue, yet the Jesus movement continues. And it's all based on one thing that we believe, which is that 2,000 years ago when a Jewish carpenter was crucified, he claimed to be God, and then he had the power to make dead things live by bringing himself back to life. And that he then makes a promise that all who follow him and believe in him and surrender their life also have the power to be brought back to life because of his power over death. That's the claim. Okay, so it's if you're skeptical and you're coming to refute this ideological philosophy of God, this maximally great being that you've heard of in schools, I'm not here to defend that. I'm here to defend, through a Christian worldview, what we believe concerning theism and concerning the God that we serve. In the same way, I wouldn't ask you to defend a version of atheism that you didn't ascribe to. In the same way, we can't put someone on trial for believing something that they don't actually believe in. But here's what I'm here to pitch to you, which is void of Scripture with simply cosmology, astrophysics, philosophy, thought, logic, forensics. My postulation, my hypothesis is this. In the marketplace of worldviews that try to make sense of the universe that we live in, the God hypothesis is far superior than any other one. In cogency, in intelligibility, in evidence, in relevant experience. And that's going to be the main area that we focus in today. When it comes to this discussion, we're gonna pitch this argument. Here's the argument for God's existence through morality. It's threefold. We talked about another argument last week, and this is the one that I want to give to you. Here's what it says, if you want to write this down. I can write it on my little board of truth here. This is kind of neat. Look, I got a pen. And it extends. So I can point at people judgmentally. Right? That's right. Oh, it's coming loose. Okay. This might be long for this world. Okay. Here's the three things that we are proposing. We're proposing this. Number one, you know what? It's on eraser right now. Arrows right here. Oh, yep, right here. I'm going to push this thing, and I'm going to push this guy, and then I'm going to write on the board. Yeah. We just got this week, so I feel like the guy on ESPN who's like, you can clearly, and their thing doesn't work, so we'll see how this works, okay? But here we go. Hopefully now that I got this figured out, we'll be good to go. Number one, here's our first premise for this argument for God's existence. It's that if God, that's the theta in Greek, God, if God doesn't exist, then objective, moral, values, and duties can't exist. Premise number two. Objective, moral, values, and duties do exist. In logic, okay, what we would do in order to prove this thing true then is we'd have to reject the antecedent in order to affirm its consequent, which then brings us to this idea, what's our conclusion? If God doesn't exist, then objective moral values and duties can't exist. But objective moral values and duties do exist, therefore, we've rejected the first part of premise A, which is here, which means we would conclude that that should not be that. So I'm going to push this button, and then this button, and then I'm going to change this. And then I'm going to push this again, and I'm going to push that, and I feel like a 4-year-old. All right. Therefore, God exists. So, again, the job of an apologist now is I've made some pretty big truth claims. I made a truth claim right here, and I've made a truth claim right here. But this is a logically following premise syllogism, which means if I can prove that 1 and 2 are true, 3 follows rightly from the premises, which means this would be a true statement. Okay? So now my job is I got to prove number 1 and number 2 true. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to negate its opposite. So what that means is we got to start identifying and defining some of these things. Okay. If God doesn't exist, then objective. Okay, so what's the word objective mean? Kenzie, give me an objective truth in the world. The sky is blue. Okay, the sky has the appearance of blue, which the sky is probably clear, but the reflection of the ocean makes the sky look blue. So good. What we have a definition of blueness, and we have a definition of skyness, and unless you're colorblind or blind itself, that doesn't change the actual idea that the majority of us would understand that the sky is blue. Now you could ask the question, who's to say that your blue isn't my red, or that my green isn't your yellow, that the calming blue that I see is really not the crazy orange that you see, but you are calmed by what I perceive to be orange, and I am made crazy by what you claim to be blue. Does that make sense? Right? Okay, so the colors I see in a sunset, I go, oh, look at those vivacious, vibrant colors. And what if you see like dark greens and dark blues? And I'm like, oh, so what brings me this vivacious, spirited orange and yellows calms you down, right? So like when I want to be calm, I want to go into like a dark blue room. And maybe you go into a like bright orange room and that calms you down, but I think that's orange and you think that it's blue. Okay, anyway, let's pretend like we don't live in the Matrix for a second. And let's continue this line of argumentation. So an objective truth is that the sky is blue, okay? Should I feel like Willy Wonka? Come with me and you'll be in a world, catch the chair, of pure imagination. Paul, I said catch the chair. You had one job and you failed. All right, so we then we're making a statement. We're saying that God is the only rational way to have objective moral values and duties. When we say moral, we're making a statement of meaning, okay? Is it moral or immoral to paint your room gray? Nothing. There's no moral principle there. There's no right or wrongness or evil or goodness. It just is. So there's some things we do that have no moral value to them whatsoever. Okay? So now some things do. And some things, depending on the circumstance, can be moral or immoral, right? If your mom says, do not paint the room orange, you know I'm allergic to orange, and you paint it orange, then does painting your room have a moral value? Yes. The color you paint it does have moral value because the circumstances are different. If I don't brush my teeth one night, is that morally wrong? No. If I don't brush my kids' teeth over and over again, is that morally wrong? Yeah, because I'm morally culpable, that means responsible for their well-being. So if I create in my kid the level of gingivitis and tooth decay to the point where they're starting to get gum diseases and gingivitis and cancer and stuff, I can be held morally responsible for that. So we understand the idea of culpability. Culpability means you're able to be tried or you are able to be held accountable for your actions. Okay? So when we say the word moral, that's what we're talking about, a meaningful. And then what is a value? What would be a moral value? Someone make a moral value statement. Who's got a moral value statement? Okay? Start with the phrase blank, then use the word is, and then give me value to it, right? Good, evil, right, wrong. Give me one of those things. Tatum, give me a moral value statement. Vanessa, I dub thee sir. What's the female sir? Is there, do females not get knighted in Britain? What? Dame Vanessa. Okay. Anyway, what is an objective? Give me a moral value statement. Good. Respect is good. Good. That's a moral value statement. Okay. Cynthia, racism is bad. Good. These are really powerful words you're using. Okay. That food is good. I'm a food critic. That movie was bad. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Slavery is evil. Give me another one, Kyla. Cookies are good. That is not a moral value statement. Okay? Yes, Paige. Cutting in line is bad. Cutting in line is bad. That is a moral value statement. We have found an action and we've made a moral statement to it. We said that's not like painting a room. That is bad. That is a moral value statement. Now give me a moral duty statement. Okay? And you can even derive it from a moral value statement. All right? Cynthia, finish this sentence based on what you said. Racism is bad, therefore, if you practice racism, you should stop. That's a duty now. We've moved from value to duty. Okay? Paige, finish your idea. If it's morally wrong to cut in line, give me a duty then in response to that. Wait your turn would be a moral value statement, or don't cut in line would be a duty. Okay? So objective moral values and duties it's the pronunciation that there are certain things with meaning that are good and bad, right and wrong, and that we ought or ought not to do. Moral values and moral duties. So on theism, or in the Christian worldview, we have a basis for why certain things are right and certain things are wrong and certain things are good and certain things are evil, which we'll get to in a little bit. The argument that we're making is on atheism, or without God, there's no such thing, there's no meaningful, reasonable, tactful, cogent, intelligible reason to have any discussion about right, wrong, good, bad. Which, if you don't believe in God, you're going, wait a minute, that's not true. I can have a lot of discussions about this stuff, for sure, but you're borrowing capital that you don't deserve to borrow. You're sitting in God's lap in order to slap his face, because you're not actually, here's what you're actually saying. If methodological naturalism is true, which is the basis of atheism, there is no God, which means we came about by random chance, then all you and I are grown-up bacteria. We are adult goo, right? We have descended from ancestors who originally came from nothing, and life sprang from non-life. And so here we are. You are like space dust. I am space dust. And how this space dust interacts with each other, right? When we see asteroids collide into each other, we don't put them on trial. There's nothing meaningful in that paradigm. And so you say, well, we've evolved morality. Okay, well, here's what you're really saying then. If we have evolved morality, yes, I did it. Okay. Yay. Okay, cool. I'm learning how to do this thing. Then when an atheist makes a moral statement, or when they give moral value or duty to something, they're saying one of three things. Number one, I personally don't like that. Okay? So when an atheist wants to have a discussion about morality, they can start with a very simple thing, which is to say, I personally don't like that. Which means they've rejected objective moral values and duties, and instead they have given themselves over to what paradigm? What's the opposite of objective? Subjective. How do you give me a subjective truth for you? She likes ice cream, okay? We might say, given the number of people in the world, that's a fairly universal subjective truth. Is anyone here like anti-ice cream? You're like, I hate ice cream. Like Chandler from Friends. Or, Ross from Friends. It's too cold. Hurts my teeth. Okay. That's in the episode, the one where Chandler doesn't like dogs. You should watch that after this. It's a great episode. Anyway, so neither here nor there. She likes ice cream. Okay, what's your favorite kind of ice cream? Okay, I think that's wrong, right? I think that everyone ought to have a favorite kind of ice cream. I've now imposed a moral imperative on someone. I think it's right for people to have a favorite flavor. And you think it's okay that you don't have a favorite flavor? So which one of us is right? Am I right that you have to have a favorite flavor, or are you right that you don't have to have a favorite flavor? Doesn't matter. It's subjective, right? They're actually not in contradiction with each other, right? Star Wars is just okay. I'm just saying things. Everyone relax. Every nerd in the room's like, technically, okay. Oh, he's got me up now. I'm going to kyber dart you. Okay. Anyway. Okay, here's a subjective statement in the world of Star Wars. The Mandalorian is the best iteration of Star Wars in all of the Star Wars universe. That is my personal subjective statement when it comes to Star Wars. Anyone else agree? Mandalorian's the best thing they've ever made as far as Star Wars goes? Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Heather. And because without Baby Yoda, nothing can be as good, right? Come on. Walk around. Just, okay. Okay. Anyway, that would be my subjective opinion. Now, if you deny God, the first thing if you want to have a meaningful discussion about morality, if you want to not sound completely ridiculous, is you would believe in relative morality, which is basically the same thing as you saying, things are good and bad depending on what I personally like or don't like. Okay? Which, again, can you talk about morality that way? For sure. But we also want to make another distinction down here between what we call epistemology, and these are big words, but they're going to be helpful maybe, I don't know, versus what we call ontology, okay? Ontology, okay? Epistemology is what things are, and ontology is the basis for why things are the way that they are, okay? So there's a difference between those two things. What are the rules of basketball? Don't travel, okay? If your foot is beyond the three-point line when you shoot, it is worth 3 points, right? Good. If you dribble the ball twice without interference from the other team, that is called double dribble, okay? And when people are on a basketball court and they're playing, they've agreed to the game of basketball, and one person commits a foul or commits some kind of a misstep in the rules, right? Who plays high school basketball here? Chloe, you play basketball, right? Chloe, when you're in a game and the other team takes 3 steps without dribbling, that's called what? Travel. Good. And when that person travels, who do you look at in order to make the call? The ref, right? If you look at the people around you, they can't do anything about it. If you scream, travel, 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 travel until you're 65 years old because of a play, is it going to be travel? No, because you lack what? What do you lack? Authority. You don't have authority. You're just someone screaming in the wind who's wasted the majority of your life and you have no friends because you just keep screaming travel, right? No one wants to hang out with a person that does that, but you don't do that. Do you ever think you've been in a game where someone traveled before? What did you do? At who? At the ref. And when the ref didn't call it, what did you do? And then what'd you do? Okay, because you don't have any other option. When the authority in your life says no, you move on, right? You don't have anything else to do. And could it have been travel and the ref missed it? For sure. And there's actually a rule book that's bigger than the referee that would decide whether that was right or that was wrong. Now, so we can actually miss the objective moral standard, the objective rule standard of basketball, and someone can misstep or misplay or not see it perfectly, but that doesn't mean that the standard doesn't exist, right? Like in the NFL, if you do something poorly and the ref doesn't see it, you can challenge it, and the ref can go back, and when the ref goes back and looks at it under review, they actually appeal to a group of referees in New York who are watching it play itself out, so they are a higher authority than the refs in the field, and the refs on the field appeal to them, and then the refs in the booth appeal to the rule book. And we try to make sense of it the best way that we can, but no one makes any argument that there is no rule book. We all say there is a rule book. And who made the rule book? Who made the rule book? Not Bill Belichick. Yeah. Whoever made the game. If you make the game, you make the rules. And the person who makes the game, everyone inside the game appeals to that. Now, of course, you can have amendments and stuff like that to it. But when you're talking about the original game, whoever makes the game gets to dictate the rules. Our argument would be our ontology or our reason and our basis as Christians for thinking things are right and wrong is that God made the game. And you and I are playing in it. And we appeal to him over and over again. What we're talking about when we're talking about what the atheists are talking about, I said that phrase a lot, is they all answer questions of epistemology, which isn't actually the question that we're asking. They're answering, here's why we think things are right and things are wrong, but that's not the question. The question is, why ought I follow it? What is the basis you have for calling things right and wrong? So one of the arguments is, okay, well, here's why things are right and wrong. It's because of personal opinion, which brings in subjective morality. So someone might say, let's talk about something pretty intense, okay? Because if you talk about something less intense, everyone goes, whatever, who cares? So I'm sorry if this is too close to home for some of us, but here we go, okay? A guy walks into Sandy Hook Elementary School, Adam Ladza, right, a few years ago, and he takes in guns and he just starts assassinating children. Perfectly innocent. He kills teachers, stuff like that. I don't remember the number. But it's horrendous, right? Especially as like a father, okay? Like yesterday, my son almost got hit by a car, okay? On our property, these random people were driving in. I don't know why they were doing it. This guy was backing up, and my son was like trying to outrun the car. It was horrific. It was Brady too. Like Brady was trying to, I was like, Brady, get off the road. I was screaming. Like top of my lungs, I'm like, stop backing up. Like, if you think, oh, I've seen Chris angry, you haven't, right? And I would say like my emotional bandwidth is like this big. I don't really go up here and I don't really go down here. I kind of exist in this moment, right? Like some of you have seen me at the most angry I get and you're like, oh, he just kind of started talking a little bit faster than normal. That's like how I get. Unless you start screwing with my kids. And then all of a sudden Papa Bear comes out and I'm yelling at people and I storm down the hill and I tell them to leave immediately. I evict our tenants who live in the barn and tell them they need to get out in 48 hours. This is the things that I did yesterday, okay? Because homie don't play with that, none, right? So it was like there was this anger that was involved in the process. Now, when we're talking about these things, we're saying that there's a reason for why those things, outside of myself, why those things are right and why those things are wrong. Epistemologist tries to explain why. You might say, why did Chris act like that? Oh, because it's not good to have your son die. Okay, these are all great things. But at its core, if he ended up hitting my son, what argument would I bring against him that has any meaning on atheism? Okay, in an atheistic worldview, what meaning, without a God, would I levy against him? What would I try him with? I don't really have anything reasonable to try him with. I might say, without God, I can say I personally don't like that, which is subjective morality. What you say is what you think, and what I think is what I think. And you're going to go to a school when you get older, you might go to college, you're going to get a liberal education, and they're going to tell you, oh, morality is relative. And no matter how many awesome books and how many awesome professors you have, the worldview of relative morality is bankrupt. It makes no sense. It's got no backing, it's got no foundation, and you end up saying one of three things. If morality is relative, you either say, everyone's has an opinion, and you might like it or you might not. The second thing you might say, instead of, I personally don't like that, you might say, most of the people I'm around here and now think that's wrong. So you might appeal to culture, and you might say, without God, if you want to have a meaningful conversation, you might appeal to culture, and you say, well, all morality is culturally based. All of morality is a vote of the people, okay? And the majority wins. And so you might even say, well, we all as people, whatever society you grew up in, it's just kind of the way that it is, and you just kind of submit to it. Which the issue with that is you can't say that phrase and also believe that society has progressed morally. Because if that were true, then everyone in their circumstances, based on their DNA, would have to grow up the way that their parents brought them up, and no one could ever transcend that. In a Christian worldview, I can tell you why. We believe that we aren't just body, we aren't just DNA, we also have a soul. And then we've got a moral framework, right? This is what Immanuel Kant, he is a very famous thinker, and he said, what gives me great pause in our universe is the starry host without and then the moral law within. So even atheists go like, it upsets me that there is a moral law inside of us. Let me read you some of these quotes from other atheists to find out what we're talking about in the line of these things. A great thinker is named Michael Shermer, and he said, essentially, if you abandon free will in favor of determinism, and moral culpability flies out the courtroom window. In other words, without free will, there is no such thing as praise or blame. And yet on atheism, in a strictly methodological, naturalistic worldview, you would have to say that that determinism is fate. Everyone has to do what they have to do. Okay? Without God, without free will, then it is as Dawkins says, very famous atheist, Richard Dawkins, wrote The God Delusion. He wrote, and I quote, this is kind of a horrific phrase, but here's what he says. In a world of blind physical forces, so he says, yes, if we all came about by some cosmic chance and we're nothing but stardust and we're grown-up germs and we're just interacting with other grown-up germs, trying to make sense of the universe, he goes, here's what we actually need to understand. In a universe of just blind physical forces and genetic replication, some people are going to get hurt, okay? Other people are going to get lucky, and you won't find any rhyme or reason to it, that is, nor any justice. So he throws out justice completely because this is just what happens. The universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is, at the bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil, and no good. So he says, if we are accidents, then why would an accident make a moral judgment on another accident? Right? Same thing. When space dust covers other space dust, we don't go, hey, there's a moral statement there. We go, no, you're an accident, that's an accident. Rocks hit into each other are an accident. Volcanoes erupt accidentally. Everything's an accident. There's no real moral culpability. He goes on to say, if there is no design, no purpose, no evil, and no good, then there's nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. He writes, DNA neither knows nor cares. It just is, and that's all we are. We are DNA, and we dance to its music. Which is fantastic to say. Again, it's one of those things you go, cool, great education. I'm reading all these neat books about how all we are is DNA. Then you ask a question, well, then what right do we have to put anyone on trial if they were just doing what their DNA made them do? That means at this moment, you are predetermined to be here. You have to be here because your system of infinite forces going all the way back to the beginning of time made it so that your brain would necessitate that you were here right now. You were not involved in it. You don't get kudos for going to church. You had to go to church. And if one of you stood up right now and you're like, not me, high kick, punch, chicken dance, we would go, shoot, that's just your machine misfiring or just firing. That all you are is a series of fizzings in your brain, chemicals fizzing in your brain. And if all we are a predetermined, no free will, determinate species, then how do we talk about things being right or wrong? Right? We don't assign value statements to things that we drop, right? Like, you stay there. You son of a gun. I told you to stay there. Well, it doesn't have a choice. It doesn't have free will. It's not cognizant. It's not conscious. It's not existential in its thought. It's a pen. But ultimately, what you and I ascribe consciousness to is a mistake. We've evolved a word called consciousness, but we have nothing more than animals have. We have to do what we have to do. All we want to do is to eat, not get eaten, and pass on our genes. The issue with that statement is simple. The issue with that statement is that if you think that's the case, then when we lock people up, we shouldn't do so on the grounds that what they did was wrong, but what they did was necessary. In that case, if someone molests a child, we can't say that was wrong. We might put them in jail, but we put them in jail going, we just don't want them to do that again. But you can't walk up and go, don't do that. In fact, if that person argues, if they're a 60-year-old and they argue, well, they're more fertile. The 13 or 14-year-old is more fertile. So I was just trying to pass on my genes. Speaking strictly Darwinistically, he's got a great point. On atheism, the only reason that we would say you can't do that, you can't rape someone like that, or you can't practice statutory rape, some 60-year-old on some 14-year-old, is we'd have to say, we voted and that's not okay. Which means in another society, if the vote went the other way, guess what would be perfectly fine? Pedophilia, rape would be perfectly fine if we voted differently. Is anyone sitting here going, I could see that being the case? I could imagine a world where all of a sudden forcing yourself on someone else would be completely acceptable. And once you say, well, our society brought it about this way, you also have to understand that that means if we all of a sudden voted and it infringed on your rights, you'd have nothing else to say. In whole regions of the world right now, they're practicing something called female genital mutilation, where when a kid is born, they literally take off the pleasure center of the female because they want women to understand you're not supposed to have fun in sex, you're just supposed to make babies. That's your only job. Now we might sit here and go, that's awful. And in the same breath, we're going to go, but all morality is just cultural. But now imagine if we just got overrun, right, by one of those societies and they said, here's the new rule. Would you all go, darn it. All right, well, this is now good. Morality is different now. Now it's good that we do this. Or how many of you would go, absolutely not. That is unfair. That is, and then you start appealing to something. When you say the phrase, it's not fair, what do you mean it's not fair? Who are you appealing to? What are you looking at? And that thing that we look at is because that God, it says in Scripture, has written the law on our hearts. The reason that we appeal, even inside of culture, where everything seems to go against what is culturally normative, we still say, God, this isn't okay. We need something better. If we can imagine a better world, what C.S. Lewis says is because there's an echo of God's perfect kingdom in our hearts that we long for. Which Richard Dawkins, the ironic thing about famous atheists, especially when I've interacted with them, is that they say, well, the reason I don't believe in God is because God in the Old Testament, I'll quote Dawkins, is the most homophobic, misogynistic, racist, xenophobic, transphobic God of all time. And therefore, there is no God, which just doesn't make any sense. That doesn't follow logically. To say, I hate the way this guy acts, therefore he doesn't exist, it's not a cogent line of thought. But everyone kind of bowed at his feet. Christopher Hitchens, same things. He wrote a book called God is Not Great. And in it, he just puts the God of the Old Testament on trial with no exegesis, with no true theology, with no understanding of God's redemptive plan. He doesn't have a background in the Bible. He doesn't know literary devices. He doesn't know any style of literature in Scripture. And yet he puts God on trial and says, look how God acts, therefore there is no God. And you go, but how does that follow? Have you guys ever been in a big fight with your parents where they were being jerks to you? Did you then try to convince people they didn't exist? Like if your dad totally and completely rejected your family and someone went, well, where's your dad? Would you go, what are you talking about? I just am. No, you'd still go, yeah, he's awful. I don't talk to him. I don't relate to him. I don't speak to him. But no one would make the argument he was never here in the first place. Right? That would be a rejection of reality. So to make that grounds, you need to borrow morality. But what does Richard Dawkins say? He says, ultimately, there is no good, there is no evil. And the next sentence he says, but what God did in the Old Testament was bad. Bad. We are forced to make these moral judgments because it's predetermined. Also, God's not very nice. That doesn't make any sense. Either we all have to do what we have to do, in which case we can't judge him as wrong, or we have free will, in which case you saying that he was wrong is just your opinion. So we might say, I personally don't like that. That's relative theory. Or, outside of theism, we might say, most of the people I'm around, let's talk about what just happened. Whoa. Most of the people I'm around here and now think that's wrong. Okay? So a few years ago, a guy went to a gay nightclub in Florida and he shot the place up. Killed 50, 60 people. At the time, was the worst gun massacre in the United States history. Did he do something right or did he do something wrong? Wrong. I would agree. I think the majority of atheists would completely agree that what he did was wrong. Now we ask the question, why was it wrong? And the only answer outside of God is you can say, I didn't like that he did that. Oh, that was powerful. When you ask the guy, do you think he was like, I don't like doing this, but here's what I'm going to do? Or did he go, this is what I want? Do you think there's actually people around the world who believe so strongly that what that man did was right and it was good? When Muhammad Atta flew a 747 airplane into the World Trade Centers, do you think he thought he was being evil? Do you think he was being evil? I think so. 3,000 people were killed that day. That was evil. He went home as a martyr. Well, he died. But his family, he's a martyr to them. He was the epitome of what morality ought to be because he killed enough Americans. Because we are an abominable people. Now, when you get in the ring with Muhammad Atta's son, and you say what your dad did was evil, and they say what my dad did was heroic, who wins? This is a question of ontology. And if you say, well, it's wrong because everyone in America voted that it was wrong, he's going to go, well, everyone in Afghanistan said it was right. So what's your next argument? Well, there's more of us than there is of you. Okay, so what if overnight everyone in Afghanistan had 77 children? And now there's more of them. Would you go, I guess 9/11 was reasonable, good, appropriate. We need another one. Or would you still go, that's not right? So we don't do science and we don't do morality based on majority. Right? Otherwise, if you were alive during World War II with the SS, when all of Germany said it's okay to exterminate the Jews, and you were German, or let's say you were Jewish, you'd have to go, they all voted. No, but the cries of the concentration camp were, God, come, bring justice, save us. They didn't sit there and go, Well, I guess everyone voted. So it's unreasonable to say, I personally don't like that because it doesn't extend beyond anything other than you. So there's no value statement to make about someone else's life. Okay? If you say, this is the way that it was, the people I'm around, this is cultural normative, and say, well, we voted it to be this way. The issue if it's voted is that can be unvoted. Third is you can say that that action or that thing doesn't best, I would say, that doesn't best, what did I say last service? I said it more eloquently than this. It's not going well. Yeah, this doesn't best benefit the survival of our species. These frameworks are the most common ones of atheists. When you throw God out of the equation of morality, you either say, without God, you're just stuck saying, I don't like that, or me and the people around me don't like that, or science says, which, whatever, that doesn't best benefit the survival of our species. And so people go, well, all morality is we, just like animals, have found a way to be cooperative, and it is good to pass on our genes. And so this is what Sam Harris wrote in The Moral Landscape. He said, whatever is good is the best for the most amount of people, and whatever is bad is what brings the most amount of pain to the most amount of people. Okay? First of all, this comment doesn't touch the question of ontology. It, again, looks at the world around us and says, here's why people act the way that they do. It has no optness in it. It has no reason for why we ought to follow it, which commits the fallacy called Hume's guillotine, which when you derive an ought from an is, you've committed a fallacy that you haven't proven. Okay? Is it painful to deck someone in the face when you're wearing brass knuckles? Kennedy, what do you think? Yes. Hume's guillotine, or Hume's guillotine, the fallacy says, because it is painful to deck someone in the face, therefore you shouldn't deck people in the face. And people go, great, that's brilliant. Well, you didn't prove that. You might be able to prove that getting decked in the face brings pain, but you didn't prove to me that therefore I shouldn't deck people in the face, because what you begged the question of, or what you assumed is, I don't want to bring pain to people. Or that painlessness is a supreme ethic. Or that it is better for me to withhold pain than to inflict pain, but you haven't grounded that in anything. Are there whole generations of the world who believe that power is more important than kindness? For sure. Are there people who come in and they don't want to create a cultural mosaic, they want to create a culturally homogenous group, and they say, if you're not one of us, we're going to murder you? Yes. Now, on an atheistic worldview, you'd have to say, well, you shouldn't do that, but who cares? That's just your opinion. You don't personally like that. Hume's guillotine says, well, that hurts people, therefore we shouldn't do it. Not the case. That's like me saying, I enjoy when people give me money, therefore give me your money. I love it when people bless me with gift cards. You have any gift cards? Give it to me. No. All I've done is I've made a truth statement followed by a value statement that I haven't grounded in any truth. So to say, well, kindness is what's good for the most amount of people, fantastic. Now tell me why I should follow kindness. I don't know. All you've talked about is epistemology. That doesn't best benefit the survival of our species. Are we consistent, even on atheism, when we say that, are we consistent with this worldview? It's very rare to find an atheist who's consistent with their worldview of believing that morality is based on the survival of our species. Would you say that the majority of atheists, as it were, if you're just broadly stereotyping theism and atheism, would you say that the majority of atheists in our country lean left-wing or they lean right-wing in politics? Are they more liberal or are they more conservative? They're more liberal. Atheists are if you just do the numbers, the majority are not going to believe that there's a God. Now, if you had to pick a side that you believe strictly on culture's basis, that is more interested in the rights of homosexuality, just by broad stereotype, would you say it's more liberal or more conservative? Which one is more concerned about human sexual liberation? The liberal side is. Do you see the frustration and do you see the misunderstanding there? that if I'm an atheist, then my worldview is that we're all brought about by chance, and that what is right and what is wrong simply help to pass on our species. And in the same breath, I say, well then, we should protect the rights of gay people. Do you know what gay people are really bad at doing? Helping our species survive. They can't do it. Now, I can tell you why treating someone who is gay with disrespect, or torturing them, or killing them, or I can tell you why, in a very simple framework, why that is always necessarily incoherent with the God that I serve. I can tell you why it's wrong. Are you ready? God is that which is good. Things that are good are what God is like. God's character is the standard of morality. Okay? Let me try to put it this way for you. Here's God. Ready? Here's what God is like. Over here, here's what God is not like. Here's what God is like. He is peace. He brings comfort. He is love. Well, that's the word joy. I'll just keep writing joy. He is love. He is mercy. Scripture says, here's what our God is like. Therefore, what is good? What is good is to practice things that are like the one who made us. It's the basketball analogy. What is it right? What does it mean to be right in basketball? It is to most align yourself with the guy who created the game. What does it mean to, in basketball, to be a consistent, continual foul committer? It's to go against the guy who made the rules of the game. Therefore, what is God not like? Well, it's the opposite of these things. Gratuitous violence. Gratuitous violence. If God is comfort, then what is not like God is to bring turmoil. If God is joy, then what is not joy? Yeah, maybe to cause suffering on other people. Gratuitous suffering. Again, we were using the word gratuitous because sometimes, do we understand a situation where violence could actually lead to something better? Yeah, right? If a guy's driving a truck at this room right now, and someone was outside and had a rock they could throw at the guy through the window and stop him from doing it, we wouldn't go, well, violence is always wrong. We would say gratuitous violence. We would say that we might even say he has a moral obligation to stop that car if he is able to, right? Turmoil, suffering. God is joy. So if God is love, then what is wrong? The hate. What's the opposite of mercy?
Punishment.
What's the opposite of mercy? Okay, it's simple. Not mercy. Justice and mercy are not at odds with each other. What's the opposite of mercy? To not show mercy. This is what Jesus talks about in the Scriptures. He says, there's been a man who's been forgiven a great debt, then he turned around and did not forgive another person his debt. This man is evil. It's when I've been shown mercy and I don't give it out. It's when I receive mercy, but I am merciless. To be merciless, to not have mercy. So here is the standard. Through a theistic worldview, we have a God who, his character, he is immutable. What's the word immutable mean? What's the meaning that God's immutable? Phone a friend. Phone a different friend. Yeah, vote for her. What'd you say? He doesn't change. God is immutable. It means he never changes. Which means I don't have to worry about who votes what in what election. What is good is always like God because God never changes. When I do something that is in line with the character of God, I do a good thing. When I do something outside of the character of God, I do a bad thing. Why is racism wrong? Because God revels in the diversity of mankind. That person is made to bear the image of God. And when I say you are less than I am because it is better to be white than it is to be black, I have gone against the character of God because God says the diversity that he's created in all of nature brings him glory. I have said that an image bearer of God is less than me. That goes against the God that we serve. So why is racism wrong? Because God is a God of diversity and love and value, intrinsic human value. Why is it wrong? Why is it wrong to prosecute, kill, and torture people who are gay? because they still bear the image of God. They are still created from God. God has called them to be children of Him. God is trying to be pursuant of them. God is life. In Him was life, and that life was the light of man. Therefore, what is wrong? To bring about death is wrong. Why is abortion wrong? Because God is life. And what does abortion do? It brings death. You can talk about whatever freedom that you want to. At the end of the day, the reason that I don't have to have all these New Age discussions is because I'm grounded in something immutable. It doesn't change. It's always necessarily God's character, what is good, and what is not His character is wrong. Why ought I do it? Because the one who made the rule book has implored on us to follow Him. He's also created a system in which those who follow Him, who practice good and surrender their bad, it's not just that we don't do these things, it's that we're going to do these things, but then we surrender them over to God and say, God, I have been violent. I have caused turmoil. I have caused suffering. I have been hateful. I haven't shown mercy. I have brought death. The Christian isn't someone who doesn't do these things. It's someone who the penalty for these things was paid by the king. The servant, I need to be ransomed. I'm guilty of all these things. So don't go, well, I know Christians who do those things. That's what the Bible says. It says we are going to be guilty. So what's a Christian? Someone who, because of God's mercy, surrenders all of our sins that go against Him. What does it mean to sin? To do something that God wouldn't do. We surrender all the ways that we weren't like Him over to Him, and then He pays for them on the cross. He pays my penalty. That's our grounding, that's our framework in a Christian worldview for what is right and what is wrong. I don't have to have these conversations. I don't have to talk about who votes what. I don't talk about what world we're in. If you asked me, you go to a country with Sharia law, and you could push a button and end it all, I would say, yes, I would. How come? Because God's not like that. If you're an atheist, and I said, if you went to a country that practiced Sharia law and you would push the button to stop all of it right away, you need to give me a reason. And if you said, well, I don't like how they do that, who cares? They do. Well, we didn't vote for that. Well, that's not your country. So you're practicing cultural elitism. Do you think your culture is better than theirs? And if you say yes, prove it without saying phrases like, it's better to give people more freedom because you just made a value statement, but your value is not grounded in anything other than your personal opinion. What if I think that slavery is more important than freedom? Do I win because I'm taller? I've lived longer? Why? I can tell you why freedom is better than slavery, because God is God of freedom. I can tell you why slavery is wrong, because God has freed us from our yoke of slavery. That all men are created equal in God's eyes. They all have intrinsic human value. But does it best benefit the survival of our species? Okay, great. Then why is racism wrong? Why is slavery wrong? If this is the case, and we believe that we can actually use let's just grab everyone who's from Nebraska, and let's arbitrarily go, they're new slaves. Everyone from Nebraska, they don't have the same human value. We'll just vote on it. Everyone vote? Good. They're all our slaves now. They can actually help us pass on our genes better. They can help me live a better life. They can produce food for me. They can grow crops for me. They can do everything from Nebraska because they grow corn. So they can do all these things for me. And every 10 people, every 10 families in America gets themselves one Nebraskan that's going to work for them and do this. And we all vote for it and it's all okay. And it helps our species survive. You see how this is bankrupt? Let me give you another way that this plays out in real life. Clarence Darrow, he was a defense attorney for a guy named Dickie Loeb. Dickie and Leopold, they killed their 14-year-old cousin because they thought it would be fun. So they did it. And they were put on trial. And Clarence Darrow, who was an atheist, he simply said, if we're going to be consistent, here's what you have to say. Here's his defense. Is Dickie Loeb to blame because out of the infinite forces that conspired to form him, the infinite forces that were at work producing him ages before he was born? This is talking about, right, genetic mutation, evolution. That because out of these infinite combinations he was born without this idea of right and wrong? If he is, then there should be a new definition for justice. Is he really to be blamed for what he didn't have control over doing? Is he to blame that his predetermined machine is imperfect? Who is to blame? I just really don't know, he said. J.L. Mackie, Oxford atheist, countered that and said, if there are objective moral values, they make the existence of God more probable than not. Thus, we have a defensible argument from morality for the existence of God. Melissa Drexler gave birth at her school prom in New York. She gave birth to an infant. It was her baby. She then used the umbilical cord to strangle the baby until it died. She put it underneath the trash can liner in the bathroom, in the locker room of her school, dumped it in there, went back on the dance floor, requested a new song from the DJ to celebrate the fact that she finally completed what she needed to do to experience more freedom in her life. And when you're consistent with your atheistic worldview, Steven Pinker, who's a famous atheist, said, we can get mad all we want, but if we think that there's no God, what she did was not wrong. Here's what he said. Steven Pinker. He said, she was simply acting out of her adaptive choice for survival, and that a true atheist, you're going to be inconsistent if you condemn neonaticide. So he said, if a baby's 3 years old, and it no longer fits the woman's adaptive choice to keep it, and she kills it, so? You can't really put her on trial for anything. He says, if we're going to be consistent with our atheistic worldview, she didn't do anything wrong. Someone then said, what about a 7-year-old? And this guy said, a 7-year-old would be a gray case. In other words, it depends on the circumstance. Now, that sounds great. It sounds awful. Let me get that straight. But what I'm saying is, you sound super progressive when you go, yeah, it's a great case. But he doesn't live that way. Like Steven Pinker has kids, and if I just thought out of the physics of my brain I went and I would like kill them, do you think he'd sit back and go, darn it, that guy's machine isn't perfect? And if I concluded and I finished, all of his kids were killed, on trial would he go, let him go, man. He couldn't help it. He had to do that. An atheistic worldview when it comes to morality is just, it's completely irrelevant to the human experience. It sounds cute, it sounds fun, it does away with God if it has an inconsistency, but it has no consistency. This is either true and not a single person has ever lived or believed it, or more likely in our human experience, we can go back to this simple idea. If God doesn't exist, objective moral values and duties can't exist, but objective moral values and duties do exist. Therefore, we have denied the antecedent, which affirms our consequent and modus tollens, which means that this is a proper, true statement. The syllogism checks out. God exists. God exists because objective moral values and duties do exist. Objective moral values and duties do exist because the antithesis of them existing are irrational, inexplicable, and not relevant to the human experience. Tonight we're going to have a forum where we're going to discuss these things. We can ask questions in real time. You can text in questions. You can bring whomever you would like to bring, and we'll have a great conversation about this to bolster the faith of those of us who are trying to follow Jesus. Maybe to create faith in those who have simply said there is no evidence for God's existence. This is the second week you've been given an airtight argument backed with facts and premises in order to understand. We've got reason beyond God said it is to believe in the God that we serve.